I want to thank Reverend Paul for his care in putting together the elements of this service, and Mr. Brown and the Gospel Choir for their contribution. Thank you. I first learned of the Milton Hershey School on a bus ride from Florida to New York City. The passenger in the seat next to me was a Hershey parent. She was worried that the income from her growing business as a personal self-defense instructor was going to make her ineligible to send her daughter back to Hershey School for the 7th grade. "Do you mean Hershey as in the chocolate candy bars?" I asked her. "That's right," she said, going on to explain the considerable benefits of a Hershey education. And it made no sense to me. Every student in the school receives a full scholarship, nearly 2,000 students, kindergarten to 12th grade. She had to be exaggerating. That would be a budget of at least $100 million for financial aid. How could that be possible? She wasn't just exaggerating, I decided. She was certifiable, not so. But she also knew martial arts, so I just played along. After all, I'd been around boarding schools since packing off as an 8th grader, a second former, in 1964. I knew the schools that had the money: Phillips Andover, Deerfield, Phillips Exeter, Hotchkiss, St. Paul's, Woodbury Forest. When I returned to the Berkshires after my Florida bus ride, I checked all this out for myself on the internet. No matter what metric I used to find the rankings of boarding schools, Hershey School's existence was nowhere to be found. The school was not even acknowledged. Exeter, I found, currently ranks number 1 in total endowment, $1.2 billion as of last June, and is tied with those other 5 schools in endowment per student, a more accurate reflection of a school's financial prowess. And Exeter's financial aid budget, I noted, was a generous $19 million, distributed among close to 500 of its almost 1,100 students. As I had supposed, my travel companion simply didn't have the story straight. Then I went to the Hershey School's webpage. The number that made me sit up and clean off my glasses was $7.8 billion. In endowment. $7.8 billion. More than 6 times the size of Exeter's endowment. More, in fact, than Exeter's, Andover's, Deerfield's, Hotchkiss's, St. Paul's, and Woodbury Forest's endowments combined. Wow. Maybe my fellow bus rider did know what she was talking about. Incidentally, Hershey's 2,640 acres make it the 3rd largest boarding school campus in the United States, behind Northfield Mount Hermon's 3,400 acres and Procter Academy's 3,000 acres. But once again, if you Google largest boarding school campuses, Hershey is nowhere to be found. Its 2,000 students also make it the largest residential education school in the country, but you would not know it to look at lists online of boarding schools with the largest enrollments. Check it out for yourself. You'll find no mention of Milton Hershey School in the rankings. A few years ago, my family and I went to a wedding near Hershey, Pennsylvania, and during the weekend we had some time to kill. I told my family I'd wanted to see the Hershey School ever since the single mother I'd met on that bus trip had enthused over the school. My family had 0 interest, but said they would give me 5 minutes to get a quick look around. They would wait in a parking area, and I'd better be back in 5 minutes or I could find my own way back to the motel. As we approached the campus, one building loomed large. I thought it might have been a planetarium, except that it was bigger than the planetariums I'd been to in New York and Boston. I'd never seen a domed building this big. I headed inside and soon found myself in the domed space. Its vastness was incredible. I ran back out to the parking lot and told my family, "You've got to see this." Reluctantly, they emerged from the car and followed me inside. When we reached the domed room, they were dumbstruck, gazing up at the 74-foot-high ceiling, the second largest such rotunda in the world, we would come to learn. The largest rotunda is in the Vatican in Rome. It would be another hour and a half before we would head back to the car. In the meantime, we talked with a man who had attended Hershey in the 1940s. When he retired from a career in engineering, he started to volunteer at his beloved school, greeting visitors like ourselves. We happened to be the only visitors around on that cold December afternoon, and he gave us his undivided attention while his wife remained in the information booth on the edge of the enormous floor under the dome. Like so many of the boys who attended Hershey in the 1940s, our host had found his way to the school after losing his father in a mining accident. When Milton and Catherine Hershey founded the school in 1909, 8 years after Salisbury School's founding, after learning that Mrs. Hershey's health would prevent them from ever having any children of their own, they made it the school's mission to care for the neediest children in the 3-county area around Hershey, the most impoverished area in the state in that period. At one time, all of the boys at Hershey School were orphans, many of them from mining families like our hosts from central Pennsylvania. Later, boys from single-parent families were included in the mission, and eventually boys from states other than Pennsylvania, and in 1976, girls from similar home circumstances. It was an extraordinary story. My family and I were enthralled. In the course of our visit, we also learned that the boys and girls admitted to Hershey School not only received 100% of their room and board from the school, but also their travel expenses to and from the campus, and their medical and dental care throughout their years at the school. Many students enter at the age of 4 and stay until they are 18. Think about it. Children who have no family to go home to at vacation times because their parents are deceased, or in some cases we learned serving prison sentences, may stay at the school. Some spend all 12 months of the year at Hershey. And that's not all. Graduates who continue to college have 100% of their college costs covered by the Hershey Trust. Their medical and dental care are paid for during their college years as well. How is such generosity possible? Milton Hershey, inventor of the chocolate bar, and his wife Catherine were visionary philanthropists who did two things to ensure the viability and the sustainability of this unique school. First, in founding the school 106 years ago, Milton Hershey poured the entirety of his first great fortune, $60 million, the equivalent of $1.6 billion in change in 2015 currency, into getting the school up and running and ensuring that every imaginable cost would be covered. Second, some years later, he locked in a staggering 30% of the Hershey Company's stock in a permanent trust fund for the school. That $100 million annually in financial aid, along with the cost of close to 700 current college students' tuitions, is covered quite comfortably from the earnings on that 30% share of one of the biggest companies in the world. Ironically, Milton S. Hershey himself, who was born in 1857 and who is, incidentally, the great-great-uncle of our own Trip Hershey, class of 2017, who shared a reading with us earlier. Thank you very much, Trip. Milton Hershey himself had very little formal education. His father struggled to make a living and moved the family often before eventually drifting away from his wife and children altogether. Hershey's father loved books, but his wife associated her husband's love of reading with his failure to provide for his family. Evidently, she discouraged young Milton from developing a reading habit, and she did not promote his formal schooling. I cannot help but think that Milton Hershey felt acutely both his lack of education and the frequent absences of a father figure in deciding at age 50 to start a school for orphan boys. Hard to believe that a series of business failures had left Milton Hershey penniless just 2 decades earlier, unable to repay family members who had staked him to various startups, indeed shunned by many in his family as an irresponsible drifter. But despite his family's misgivings and his financial setbacks, Milton Hershey had several things going for him as he pondered his future in the mid-1880s. A work ethic second to none, an unshakable belief in himself, and, perhaps most importantly, the secret he had learned while apprenticing for a candy maker in Denver. Fresh milk makes good candy. Within 5 years, Hershey had created his first runaway success, a melt-in-your-mouth caramel candy made with milk. While these caramels made Hershey his first million, it would of course be chocolate give him his real fortune and pave the way for the Milton S. Hershey School. That in itself is an extraordinary story, essentially Hershey's invention of the process and the machinery for the mass production of chocolate, a market that did not even exist when Hershey sold his Lancaster Caramel Company to raise the funds for what he was convinced was an enormous, untapped market for chocolate, and then invented the Hershey Bar, which had become the nationwide symbol for quality chocolate in a phenomenally short time. And yes, the Hershey Kiss was apparently Milton's idea as well. In founding the school just 9 years after the establishment of the Hershey Candy Company, Mr. Hershey demonstrated his firm belief that wealth should be used for the benefit of others. The school's deed of trust stipulated that, quote, all orphans admitted to the school shall be fed with plain wholesome food, plainly, neatly, and comfortably clothed without distinctive dress, and fitly lodged. Due regard shall be paid to their health. Their physical training shall be attended to, and they shall have suitable and proper exercise and recreation. They shall be instructed in the several branches of a sound education. The main object in view is to train young men to useful trades and occupations so they can earn their own livelihood. Close quote. That deed of trust has been modified only slightly and only after all due consideration over the years so as to expand the reach of the school's service to a broader and broader range of needy children from impoverished families. Indeed, eligibility for admission is limited to children from families with incomes under $16,000 a year. It is a truly remarkable legacy, perhaps best summed up in a tribute to Mr. Hershey at the time of his death in 1945 from the chairman of the board of the National City Bank of New York. Quote, he measured success not in dollars, but in terms of a good product to pass on to the public, wrote Gordon Rentschler, and still more in the usefulness of those dollars for the benefit of his fellow men, close quote. For the many of you who will go on to live lives of great financial success, these are words to live by, and Milton Hershey's is, I believe, a life worthy of your emulation. Thank you.